Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining this virtual meeting of the Audit, Compliance, and Risk Committee of the Board of Trustees and the Research Foundation Board of Directors. As we proceed with our agenda, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. I will now call the roll of the committee. Jim Rogers, I'm obviously here. Benita Black.
Here.
John Chilton. John Smith.
Here.
Gary Stewart.
Here.
All right, having determined a quorum is present, I would like to call this meeting to order. The first item of business is the approval of minutes from October 24th, 2019 meeting. May I have a motion from a committee member to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any abstention? The motion carries and the minutes stand approved. Our next item of business is a review of the independent external auditor's audit plan. Chris Suda, would you begin, please?
Yes, thank you, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for inviting CLA today to present our independent external audit services plan for the University of Louisville. For those of you whom I have not already met, my name is Chris Suda. I am the principal in our higher education group specializing in audits of public universities. And with me today on the call is Ethan Lay. He's the overall engagement in charge. And just to let everyone know, CLA is in the third year of its contract. So on page 2, if you want to follow along, is a copy of the agenda. And today I would just like to cover the following: the engagement scope and deliverables, the team and their overall roles, CLA's responsibilities, the university's responsibilities, objectives of the financial statement audit, CLA's audit methodology, our preliminary risk assessment, objectives of the single audit, the timeline, milestones, and targeted dates for the deliverables, and an update on government auditing standards. On page 3, let's just confirm the engagement scope and deliverables for the year ended June 30, 2020. So just to confirm, we will be providing our independent auditor's report on the financial statements of the University of Louisville, the Athletic Association, and the Research Foundation. We'll be providing reports on internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. We'll provide our reports on the single audit. We have our NCAA agreed upon procedures report on compliance, and then report on House Bill 622, our report on lease law compliance, and then our required reports to the audit committee. And then moving to page 5, I have provided a visual of CLA's hand-selected management team to lead the engagement. And please note, we have engagement team leaders specializing in healthcare and hospitals and information systems and student financial aid. Moving to page 6, I have provided the engagement team's names, their role on the engagement, and their contact information for your use. And then on page 7, we've highlighted CLA's responsibilities for which we have been engaged. And our overall responsibilities is to express an opinion about whether the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects, obtain reasonable assurance, about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatement, evaluate the university's controls, communicate to the audit committee, any identified significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We conduct our audit in accordance with government auditing standards. We're required to comply with the Code of Professional Conduct by the AICPA, and then perform an audit with an attitude of professional skepticism. And then we communicate all required information to the university management and the audit committee. Moving to pages 8 and 9, we have highlighted the university's responsibilities, which are broken down into 3 subcategories. So that would include the university's responsibilities, the overall audit committee's responsibilities, and the combined responsibilities of the audit committee and the university's management. So let's move to page 10, where I've highlighted the objectives and the areas of audit emphasis for the financial statement audit. Just want to provide that information. And on pages 11 and 12, we cover CLA's 4-phase financial statement audit methodology. And just to let you know, we're currently in phase 2, which is systems evaluation. On page 13, we've outlined our preliminary financial risk assessment and the planned response. The assessment and plan response, just to let you know, I mean, that's ever changing and it'll evolve until, we finalize our evaluation. And then on pages 14 and 15, I have provided some areas of impact related to COVID-19. We're all dealing with this pandemic, so there's areas impacting the university, its overall operations. There's definitely audit and considerations and specific accounting and related compliance. I do want to highlight, it's definitely worth noting that the Office of Management and Budget's release of the planned addendum compliance supplement related to the CARES Act Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, for which the university did receive funds. The planned release could be as late as early October or as early as late August. And I only bring this up because this could impact the planned finalization of the audit and the release of the reports. And honestly, our hands are tied as the independent external auditor, as would any firm. We'll have to get through this compliance work as the university receives funds. So CLA is going to keep the university and the committee up to date on the status of the planned timing of the release of this compliance supplement. And then moving to page 16 is our single audit objectives and our areas of audit emphasis. Just want to let you know that the federal program that's preliminarily considered major that will be under compliance audit is Student Financial Aid Cluster, which is the same major program that was audited last year. And then on page 17 is CLA's single audit methodology. Just want to let you know we're currently in phase 1, which is the risk assessment and planning stage. On page 18 is the overall engagement timeline, and here I've noted significant milestones and target dates. But as I mentioned earlier, things could change related to the release of that OMB's compliance supplement addendum. But we will definitely keep everyone up to date on the status. And then on pages 19 and 20, we have summarized the government accounting standards, impacting the university. The thing that I want to note here is that the Government Accounting Standards Board, GASB, has postponed the effective implementation date by 1 year for all of these standards due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So, GASB did the right thing here in light of the pandemic, and everyone is extremely appreciative of that. So that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them at this point. I just want to go ahead.
Chris, Gary Stewart here. With COVID-19 and many employees working from home over extended period of time, do you anticipate any different review of controls because of this? I've heard some organizations say they think their controls actually got better when people were working remote, but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Very good question. Yes, so we will be, taking a look and evaluating internal controls, specifically around information technology. So we're going to have to perform a review of controls pre-COVID and post-COVID. It's going to be a lot of added work, but it's just the environment that we're working in. And, to be honest, our information systems team, Amanda Kemp, she'll be identifying the additional procedures that she'll be performing related to information systems, noting that, there are definitely some additional risks to consider, with people working remotely. So yeah, excellent question. And yes, it's being addressed. And I just to throw out there, our firm has worked really hard. We have provided to all of our auditors, a COVID-19 assurance guide. So, there's been a lot of information provided by the AICPA and other associations, related to auditing in the, COVID environment. And we're performing a lot of our audit procedures remotely. So it's the world we're living in, and we, our firm has done a great job addressing these risks. So great question.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Are there any additional questions for Chris? Hearing none, this item was for informational purposes only and requires no action. Next on our agenda today are updates from the Vice President for Risk Management, Audit, and Compliance. Sandy Russell, would you brief the committee, please?
Sure. Thank you, Jim. First, I'd just like to take a minute and say thank you to all of the administration, staff, and faculty for their full cooperation and support, and all of the risk management, audit, and compliance work that we've done since our last report. We appreciate your help. And then, Jake, if you'll go to slide 29, we'll start with the compliance status report. Just wanted to bring to your attention here that this report is for period ending May 31st, 2020. As you can see, we've broken this out by source, status, validity. We have 82 incidents that have been reported. We have 12 that are currently open. The type of issues that we've seen range from code of conduct, abuse of leave policy, retaliation. We did have 5 COVID-19 related reports. Those were mostly misunderstanding of the remote work policy and social distancing. I'm happy to say that those are all resolved. Okay, Jake, the next slide, please. This is the integrity compliance activity update. Excuse me. As you can see, that we've worked on 3 new or significantly revised policies since our last update. Also wanted to bring to your attention the work that we've done on the new website for the policy and procedure library. Compliance has totally renovated this site. We've cleaned it up and made it more user-friendly. We still have some work to do, but it's much improved. And I apologize for not putting the link there. It's louisville.edu/policies. But if you have a minute, check it out. It's much improved.
Sandy, we can send it to everybody as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'll make a note. Okay, the next slide is the information security status report. This report, as you can see, we had 18 total events reported. I'm happy to say that we have no open investigations at this time. We had 10 non-reportable items, and they were still investigated and addressed, but they didn't require any reporting. And that would be something like a computer that was stolen that didn't have any sensitive data and was encrypted. One item I just wanted to bring to your attention that you'll see when we update from now on is the KYPI that's listed. That's formally known as House Bill 5. We're abbreviating it KYPI because its official name is too long, Personal Information Security and Breach Investigation. Next slide, please. This is the information security update. One thing that we're really proud of, I wanted to bring to your attention, is that the ISO has performed in excess of 150 vendor contract reviews. This has been especially important since we've been working remotely. We're reviewing these contracts for security controls to make sure these companies that we're going to work with are going to safeguard and secure our information. And then the next slide is the risk management activity update. We completed the renewal of 14 insurance policies for 7/1. That included general liability policy, professional liability, crime, auto, cyber. Another item that Risk is working on is updating our policies and procedures related to our youth protection policy. Our youth protection officer is working closely with her counterparts at the ACC group to make sure that we have updated guidelines in place for camps and programs that are going to be on our campus this fall. Okay, Jake, the next, well, are there any questions? Okay, Jake. The next item is for informational purposes. All the departments that now report under risk, audit, and compliance have put together work plans. When you go through here, you'll notice an emphasis on training and education to the university community. We really want to partner with other departments and let them see the value that we can bring, whether it's helping them with new projects and proposals, programs, or just showing them what our area can do. All right, Jake, I think the next slide would be page 55. And this is the audit service report. And you can follow along here and see, we talk a little bit about some of the issues that we had with COVID working remotely. It did set us back a little bit on some of the audits that we had planned. You can see here that we have information on upcoming processes, budgeting of our time. On page 57, you can see where we've listed out 3 of the audits that were done since we last reported. We have here the HSC accounting receivables and billables. That only had 1 recommendation, and actually that was a really well-run department. We made a recommendation that they utilize the endorsement stamp upon receiving checks. We also asked, can we do away with paper checks and just have vendors do wire transfers? So those have all been implemented. And then if you'll go to page 59, you can see here that we currently have 6 projects that are currently being worked on, ranging from human resource staff compensation and hiring. The next page, you can see contract services, procurement services. We have other activities on page 61 listed, some consulting that we've done, the travel card implementation. And then if you turn to page 63, you'll see this is an update of our 1920 audit plan. You may notice on here that we had 6 items that were canceled. It doesn't necessarily mean that these items will not be picked back up and addressed again. One of the main reasons that we had to cancel some of these were because we had the retirement of our IT auditor, and we just don't have the expertise right now to get that done. We are in the process of trying to hire another auditor. And also some of the things that cause items to move off here is that we're also reviewing this on a quarterly basis, and things change. We may get a hotline issue that we'll have to stop something and then address. We may have a request from leadership to stop and start on another project. So I just wanted to bring to your attention, that's why some of these have had to be canceled or postponed. The infectious disease that you'll see here, that's actually being worked in to the Ryan White grant that you're going to see on our proposed audit plan. So, Jake, if you will, the next slide. This is the proposed audit plan. Please keep in mind that audit service reevaluates this quarterly. Audit services, a little bit of information on how we get here. Audit services prioritizes potential audit projects in our audit universe using a mixture of data analysis, emerging risk, new incentives, historical hotline calls, and of course our risk assessments. So this document really changes as we go along based on the needs and what's happening at that time. So Jim, this is the item, this is the action item. Are there any questions or issues?
Yeah, this is Mary Nixon, Sandra, and thank you. I'm not a member of the committee, but I think I can ask questions anyway.
Sure.
This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart as a former auditor, and I appreciate all the work that you and your team do, particularly given the size of your team. It would be helpful in terms of understanding how you all prioritize things to actually see at some point. It does, I mean, I'm okay with going ahead with this today, but it would be interesting to see what the audit universe looks like and have a better understanding of your all's risk assessment process to understand how you actually do prioritize these projects.
Sure, we'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any other questions of Sandy?
I guess I have one more, and that just is, when you've got a vacancy like you have with your information security auditor, do you all look at the possibility of, outsourcing, co-sourcing in order to not have to cancel projects?
Yes, we have talked about that. Actually, that's a topic that we're going to get into because we've had difficulty trying to find an auditor. So this is one of the topics that the Director of Audit Services and I have really kind of already started talking about.
Excellent.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Mary.
Thank
So
you.
our last item of business is the approval of the 2020-21 Audit Services Work Plan. And Sandy, I believe you've already briefed us on it.
Yes.
So may I have a motion to approve the 2020-21 Audit Services Work Plan as presented? So moved. Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition, abstention, like sign. The motion carries. Having no other business to come before the committee, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please signify aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
We are ready to proceed with the Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting. Dr. Burse, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining this virtual meeting of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee of the Board of Trustees. As we proceed with our agenda, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. I will now call the roll of the committee. Raymond Burse here, Benita Black.
Here.
Sandra Frazier.
Here.
Jasper Noble.
Here.
Crystal Wallace Boaz.
Here.
Ron Wright.
Right here.
Having determined a quorum is present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the April 23rd, 2020 meeting. Do I have a motion from a committee member to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Abstention? Motion carries. Our next items of business are the approval of 3 new academic programs. Provost Bain, would you brief the committee?
Sure. We have 2 graduate certificates and 1 undergraduate certificate to look at today. So these are not full degree programs. They are credentials. The first one is a certificate in artificial intelligence in medicine that we hope to begin in fall of 2020. And it is a program that focuses on how artificial intelligence can be used in medicine to, deliver medicine, to create machine learning opportunities and techniques in the analysis of medical problems. We believe that there's a strong desire for this program. It's a 15-hour program, and I have Herman Freebos, who is from the School of Medicine and the Speed School of Engineering, and Ayman Elbaz online if anybody has questions for them. Ayman is the chair of our bioengineering program. Hearing no questions, this comes to you recommended by the Faculty Senate and also endorsed by both me and by Neely. So do you want me to do all 3, Dr.
Yes,
Burke?
do all 3. That's the way they got it set up.
Okay. The next one is a recommendation for a certificate in human resource leadership. This is the undergraduate 12-hour degree or certificate. The purpose is to prepare individuals who are working in military, corporate, and other professional settings, but who may not have had already a full degree. You can get this as part of a degree program or as a standalone certificate. I believe that both Matt Bergman and Brad Shuck, who are in this program and have developed this certificate, are here to speak if there are questions about it.
Okay, any questions from anybody? Okay, let's do the next one.
All right. And the last one is a certificate in managerial analytics for graduate students. It also hopes to start in fall of 2020. It is designed for individuals who are preparing for careers as managers. So they are not necessarily hardcore data analytics people, but they know that as anybody in education knows, that analytics is part of any career where you're going to manage people and make decisions. And so this is really an opportunity for people to get a certificate that will allow them to make to make business decisions, but it's not a full-fledged analytics degree. All right, so it's a certificate. And I believe that Richard Germain, who is oversees the graduate programs in the College of Business, is here today to answer any questions that you might have about this.
Any questions from anyone? Okay, given that, may I have a motion to approve the creation of a certificate in artificial intelligence in medicine, a certificate in human resource leadership, and a graduate certificate in managerial analytics?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Our next item is the approval of an extension of the phased retirement policy for the faculty. Dr. Bain, would you brief us on this recommendation?
Sure. We have had a phased retirement policy since February of 2003. So the first installment was a 2-year plan, and then it has been renewed every 5 years since. So we are now up for another 5-year renewal. The program is designed to allow faculty to phase out over between 1 and 3 years of retirement. They give up tenure at the moment that they say that they want to pursue this plan, but they are allowed to retain between 33 and 50% of their salary and also their duties. And so it's really up to an individual faculty member to declare that they would like this plan, and then to work with a chair and a dean in order to establish what duties they will perform for 1 to 3 years. And at any time, so for instance, this year we had a dean who asked if he could not support the 3rd year of a phased retirement for a faculty member. The faculty member was in agreement with that because the duties had changed at that institution as a result of COVID, or at that unit as a result of COVID-19. They didn't need the services that faculty member had been providing as 33% of the job. So it's a very flexible plan. It has saved the university money over the years since 2013. I think it's about $13 million in salary that have been recovered and stored up for a couple of years in order to then hire somebody when that faculty member actually retires. So we are asking for a renewal of it at this time. I don't know if you want additional information.
No, I think that's sufficient. Is there any questions from any committee member? Okay. May I have a motion from a committee member to approve the extension of the phased retirement option as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that it be approved. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Our next item is the approval of a posthumous degree. Sadly, Casey Johnson, a student in the Doctor of Nursing Practice program in the School of Nursing, passed away on June 13th. A request from the School of Nursing Dean Sonia Harden to grant Casey a posthumous degree has been received and reviewed by the Dean of the Graduate School, Paul DeMarco. He noted that Casey was in good academic standing and had completed the majority of the requirements for her degree, as well as the capstone project. Casey meets the graduate school's guidelines for the awarding of a posthumous degree. The Executive Vice President and Provost joins the Dean of the Graduate School and the Nursing Doctoral Affairs Committee in supporting the awarding of this degree. Dr. Boehm or Dr. Benaputi, do you have anything else to add to this?
No, we have policies in place that govern the awarding of posthumous degrees, and I think that Casey exceeded every one of those requirements. So this is one that I have absolutely no doubt about.
I would echo that sentiment. This is a very worthwhile thing for us to do, and if it brings some solace to the family, we are honored to do that.
Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the awarding of a degree of Doctor of Nursing Practice to Casey Johnson?
So moved.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Our next item is the approval to rename the Honors House. On September 30th, 1996, the Board of Trustees formally renamed the university's Honors Building to the Overseers Honors House to honor the long commitment of the Board of Overseers to the university and especially to the support of the university's honors program. However, on July 9, 2019, the Board of Overseers formally adopted its new and current title, President's Council. Therefore, it is appropriate to rename the facility as well. This recommendation was unanimously approved by the university-wide Committee on Awards and Designation. Dr. Benaputi, you have anything to add?
Chairman Burrs, this was a request brought forward to us by our Black Student Union, among others. And candidly, when we changed the name of the Board of Overseers to President's Council, an action that I initiated because I'd heard from people, I wasn't fully aware of the fact that we still had this name. I strongly recommend the Board of Trustees supporting us in this action. It is an inflammatory term. It is a racist term that we don't need today.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the renaming of the Honors House as listed?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to be approved. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the annual report of the Student Government Association President, Jasper Noble. Jasper, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Jake, would you mind pulling up that report on the main screen? Thank you. And this is a long report, so if you just want to go to the last page, I'm going to walk everybody through the main parts of each section and then kind of give an outline for it. So last year, President Fuller and our communications director, Dasha Kalaskina, and myself set out to create a new plan for the future of SGA, of what we were going to work on looking forward, and to formalize it into this structure of clear goals and clear outcomes that we were looking for. This report was created by Ben Barbary, who is now the academic vice president. Last year, he was my deputy chief of staff, and he had the great idea of auditing the student government, of saying, where are we being successful? Where is there still room to grow? And how much of this plan that we set forward have we actually accomplished? So looking at it, he went through our entire plan through two categories. The first are goals, and these goals are broader. They're things that we're trying to achieve, more ideas that we're trying to make happen on the university's campus. And the outcomes are specific, tangible markers that we can judge how successful we've been in achieving these. So I've just got a few of the key points from each of the 5 sections: affordabilities, facilities, student services, academic enrichment, and student engagement, that I'd like to talk about as major successes that SGA has had this year. The main one in affordability that I want to give an enormous amount of credit to the ELSB and to members of the Student Government Association for are the Cardinal Cupboard. It is a need blind food pantry that we've put in the Student Activity Center, where any student or employee of U of L can come in and get food that is brought in by Dare to Care, that's brought in by Kroger, that's donated by students and by faculty members. It has been one of the most successful things that I have ever seen SGA as a unit do, and I'm immensely proud of it, and I'm so excited to see the growth that we're going to see from it coming forward. Within the facilities, one of our largest goals over the past few years has been the creation of a new cultural and equity center. The one that was behind Miller previously was in disrepair and had not been paid the attention that it needs. So we're happy to see that with the construction of the new housing units where Miller and Threcold were, there will be a new cultural and equity center that's massively increasing in space and resources and creating a place where students feel comfortable and that meets the adequate needs that the previous building failed to do. Within student services, we've been effective in keeping low costs for commuter parking students to park near the stadium, so it's easier for them to stay and less of a financial burden, and an increase to access for on-campus housing for upperclassmen, so that they're not searching in the Louisville area around campus, but they're actually able to live on campus, close to their studies, close to where everything is happening. And having that opportunity is something that we're really happy, and that I have to give a lot of credit to Lydia Burns for fighting for and helping to make happen. Within student enrichment and academic enrichment, we've increased support for underserved students, especially in response to COVID-19. This has been hand in hand with Dr. Boehm, with all of the deans. I think there's been a really exceptional response to meeting student needs during this crisis. And I hope that this kind of response of immediately responding to a problem and doing so with care and with empathy and with a lot of thought is something that we continue to do, because I think it was really effective here. And I think that there was a major reception of gratitude from students about how we responded to this emergency. As well, we also improved the course evaluation process so that students are able to give feedback on how a course was successful, how a course needs improvement, and what professors can do in the future to keep making these enrichment experiences better. In terms of student engagement, that's been one of our most successful areas. In 2018, we had some of the highest voter turnout in our student body that we've ever had. Nearly 40% of our students voted in the 2018 election. This past year, we were designated as a voter-friendly campus, which is something that we're very proud of. Not many campuses across the country get to call themselves official voter-friendly campuses. And the fact that we've been able to do that for a few years in a row, I think speaks to the commitment we have to civic engagement and the civic duties of our students. Within the SGA Senate, we created a diversity and inclusion committee, which is something that we have long needed so that we can redress some of the issues that have happened on campus and put a focus on improving diversity, increasing inclusion, and making sure that every voice on campus is heard to an equal amount and that everybody gets a say in what the student government is doing. Beyond that, we had a lot of success in civic engagement and meeting with elected leaders. We've done large lobbying projects and advocacy projects in Frankfurt that saw quite a bit of success, meeting with numerous legislators and members of the executive branch. As well, over the past 2 years, we've taken trips to DC to advocate to Senator McConnell and Chairman Yarmouth and the rest of the Kentucky delegation. And they've been quite receptive and have taken a lot of care with what students have brought them and what we're trying to promote, which is increasing in funding for U of L and increased support from the federal government for higher education by and large. So Jake, if you want to go to just that last page where it has all of the markers, this right here. So the 2025 plan was set to be a 5 to 6 year strategic plan of how student government is going to implement the changes that we want to see on campus. If you look through the 5 sections and you look at the overall total of the outcomes that we've tried to achieve to make those broader goals happen, we're almost halfway there in 2 years, which I think speaks to 2 things. First is that the student government, by and large, over the last 2 years has been incredibly successful and incredibly hardworking at trying to make these changes and fighting for them and making sure that when there's a problem, it's being addressed consistently. And what I think it also shows is that we have a lot of capacity to keep moving forward and to keep thinking bigger. There are areas where we're clearly successful, like student engagement, and there are areas where we need to do better, like affordability, accessibility, academic enrichment, and retention. This audit and future audits to happen, I think, are great markers of how student government can work and how student government should work. And I know Sabrina's on here. Maybe a few other members of the next top 4 are on there. I think what this shows is that they have a lot of work to do, but that they can keep up this fantastic progress that student government has made. And I personally am incredibly proud and incredibly excited that we're handing over this great plan to Sabrina, to the rest of top 4, because I'm confident that we're leaving it in great hands and that they're going to do better than my administration and the administrations that have come before. So thank you, everybody, for listening. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And I appreciate everything that you have all done for me and allowing me to be on this board. I'll give a more formal introduction to Sabrina, I think, at the end of all of our meetings. But thanks for listening, and thanks for helping me and improving this university consistently.
So anybody have any questions before I ask mine? Jake, if you could pull up that pitch and go to pages 103 and 104. And I guess my question is where the sections talk about improve instructor accountability, and the reference is no enforceable policy regarding uploading the syllabi to Blackboard, the posting of grades. I guess my question is, does the university not have a policy regarding those items?
So we do have policies on some of these. So it is a requirement that faculty post their syllabi to Blackboard. It is a fact policy, actually. What happens is the question of how we enforce it when someone doesn't. And so one of the things that I charged last year, and I am due to get a report sometime in July, is a committee to come up with accountability assessments for people. All right, so we have rules that we have not got clear with enforcing in terms of faculty. So there is a committee that is making, and I think one of Tom Hoy's people is on it, the faculty affairs vice provost, and about 12 other people from different units, looking at how we can come up with, I hate to use the words punishments or disciplinary actions when people don't do a small thing that we ask them to do. So these obviously don't rise to the level of removing someone's tenure. And we have very few disciplinary actions between nothing and removing tenure. And so that's what we're trying to do, get a staged disciplinary set of actions.
Actually, two things that I would add to this, Chairman Burse, is that on this, it is a very real issue. And so it's part of our strategic planning. As you heard Beth talk about, we said this is not, and actually faculty themselves identified this and said this has to be part of what kind of a culture are we creating for the students. Think of this as, instead of our asking, are the students ready for class, which is very important, it's also, are we as teachers ready for the students? Are we doing what we need to do? Are we failing the students, or are the students failing the school? So that's part of the strategic planning. The second part of it is that Sandy and Beth are working on a faculty accountability group where they'll actually look at it, because it's true that we don't have very many actual metrics in terms of how do we enforce, what do we do. And so I forget the name of the group, but Sandy and
all the faculty accountability.
Yeah.
So there's two. One is a more proactive, positive thing coming out of the strategic plan, where how do we create positive incentives? And then the second one is from a compliance point of view, what are things we should be doing?
You know, I find it sort of troubling that sort of what I consider basic functions is that we now have to have a separate committee to go through and work through that, you know, about telling students what textbooks they need before the classes, the first day of classes. I mean, these are basics, and why at this point in time at this university we're still struggling with how to do that and make it and have some consequences associated with it.
If I may say so, it's not that they don't have syllabi. As you see, this is about posting it to Blackboard. And candidly, it sounds terrible. But if you were to ask at Ohio State, Kansas, Texas A&M, everywhere we struggle with it. And I think this time with COVID-19, so it's not to say that's okay, but it's just the harsh truth that it's difficult to get 100% enforcement because we have not looked at it that hard before. This time with COVID-19, the awareness of that has gone way up. And I also credit our students for listing this as things to audit, and we are very much on board, as you know. So we're trying to create that culture, and I guess it's the ugly secret of academe. That's actually what happens elsewhere, but that's no excuse, especially with your support and our emphasis on it. We were just trying to point out that we're trying to do both the carrots and the sticks, and that this awareness came up from the faculty.
Right, and one of the things that we've been trying to do with the Faculty Senate and also with the Faculty Affairs Deans is to try, and the Deans actually, is to shift the institution from a traditional faculty-centered place to a student-centered place. And this has been something that I said to the deans the first time I met with them 2 years ago, that we wanted to make that shift. And it's a hard shift to make when faculty have been used to not having any kind of stick or even a carrot to do some of the right things. I will say most of our faculty do the right things. And I think that probably Jasper and Sabrina would both agree. It's the outliers who don't that we're trying to figure out how to bring them on board and to make them more student-centered. And just as a piece of information, this year, the Faculty Senate and the Provost's Office, so Krista and me, chaired a committee on faculty and mental health of our students, like what is our role as faculty in helping students overcome their mental health issues. And they came up with a whole recommendation of policies that faculty could employ that would make life easier for students, not make lower standards in any way, not lower academic standards, but make life easier for students to be able to reach our standards. And that came from the faculty. That will have a whole lot more sway in some ways than somebody just saying you must do X.
I would say there's an issue and a problem there, and so rest assured, I guess as we go through this year, I will be following up with this committee while serving on it in regards to it, because I'm somewhat disturbed by that. And I've been at other institutions and I've been at other major institutions, and they do enforce their policies as it relates to that. So couching it in terms of what other institution does doesn't answer the University of Louisville problem, and we need to face it and face into it.
And if I can add, I would agree with Beth that this is not a problem that is widespread. The vast majority of students, it's easy to access everything on Blackboard. We just don't think any student should have to go begging for it. And it's one of those things that I agree, Dr. Burst, it needs to be at 100%. So it's not a widespread issue that all students are flailing to get their syllabi and their information, but it's something that there really can't be any cracks in.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Jasper, for all the work that you've done this year and you will continue to do for the next month in terms of keeping us informed and leading us. And I'd like to welcome Sabrina to this. We'll do a formal handoff at our July meeting, I assume. But anyway, thank both of you. Having finished that, may I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters pursuant to KRS 61.8101F?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are now in executive session. I ask only the trustees, president, provost, legal counsel, chief of staff, and assistant secretary to remain. For those of you dropping off the call, we will alert you to when we have concluded the closed session, but you should also monitor the live stream for an indication of when we resume the open session. So now we go into During the executive session, personnel matters were discussed. We will now take the following actions. May I have a motion to approve the president's recommendation regarding personnel matters as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved in second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Any abstentions? Motion carries. May I have a motion to approve the president's recommendation regarding promotion and tenure as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Any abstention? Motion carries. Having no other business to come before the committee, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 The motion carries. We are adjourned.
All right, we are good on time. Chair Medley, you may begin the Finance Committee meeting whenever you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me, Jake?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining the virtual meeting of the Finance Committee of the Board of Trustees. As we proceed with our agenda, please remember to mute your microphone when you are not speaking. I will now call the roll of the committee. Diane Medley here. Scott Brinkman.
Here.
Raymond Burse.
Here.
Jasper Noble.
Here.
And Krista Wallace Boaz.
Here.
Okay. Having determined a quorum present, I would like to call this meeting to order. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes from the April 23rd, 2020 meeting. May I have a motion from a committee member to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Could I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion of those minutes? All those in favor signify aye.
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 Any opposition or abstention? The motion carries and the minutes stand approved. All right. Our next item of business is an addition to the agenda, allowable as this is a regular committee meeting, the date of which has been posted on our website since July 2019. The recommendation is to approve an increase in the Research Resource Center air handling replacement project originally approved by the Board of Trustees on April 23rd, 2020. It is a part of a resolution to finance $2.5 million for capital improvement projects. The 25% increase to the original cost is due to unforeseen building infrastructure issues. Dan Durbin and Mark Watkins, would you like to share with us additional information?
Sure, I can. This is Mark Watkins. So the estimate was provided before we did a deep dive into the infrastructure of the building. When the formal bid process started and we had contractors come out, they had realized that the system that was needed was going to be much larger than what we currently had, and that the load itself was going to be a tremendous burden on the infrastructure, which was the wall and the roof. So it increased the cost for the construction and material, and it also increased the architectural fees because we had to redo all the drawings. And
okay.
If you see here, that this is a little bit more detail if anybody wanted to kind of go through what the specifics were of it, but that was a high level summary.
Okay.
Move approval.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any not in favor or abstentions? All right, that resolution is approved for the additional cost. Let's see.
Thank you.
I asked that Chair Mary Nixon to include this in the consent agenda for the executive committee later today. All right, our next item of business is the approval of the 2020-2021 operating budget. Dan Durbin, would you brief us on this?
Yes, ma'am. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you. We'd like to propose the operating budget for the University of Louisville for the upcoming fiscal year. There haven't really been any material changes since last month's budget workshop. The budget is built on what we feel is very solid current year FY20 performance that we'll talk about in a few moments with an update. But unfortunately, the risks of COVID-19 continue to haunt us into next year from a revenue standpoint related to enrollment and state support, and also from an expense standpoint related to increased costs for making sure that the campus is safe. However, we do have many mitigation strategies, continuations of the mitigation strategies that we implemented for the current year. I call them the $39 million plan, but we will continue some of those into next year. We have an array of them. We will use some of them at the onset of the fiscal year, and we may have to rely on some of the others as we get through the year as things unfold. We've tried to design a budget that's reasonable, that's responsible, but also flexible to meet the events of the future as they unfold. And since we're in a kind of a new time, we've also tried to change the display of the budget. Rather than throw PowerPoints up on the screen, we went out with a document, added some words to the numbers, and if you don't mind, we'll go through the document because we've tried to present the budget through different lenses and at different levels to aid in both the transparency and the understanding of the budget. So with that, I'd ask Jake to turn to page 1 on the PowerPoint, or I'm sorry, on the document. Yeah, keep going. There you go. There you go. Okay, the proposed 21 budget is in front of you on table 1A. It's basically about a $1.2 billion budget, and it includes all of the funding sources by entity that the university is responsible for. And when I say by entity, I mean the Research Foundation, which includes grants and clinical dollars. It includes the ULA funds that flow through the university. It includes foundation funds which flow through the university, not the entire foundation, but the foundation funds that are received by the university and spent by the university, and also some other departmental funds. Now, as you'll notice on the chart, general funds is shaded, a little darker gray than the others. And the reason being is when we look at the budget for the university, we group our funding into 2 main pieces. The first piece is what I will refer to as self-balancing funds. And those are funds that are received by the departments. The revenues for those funds are largely dictated by external sources. Grants, for example, you receive, the federal government grants you a grant for $200,000. That is budgeted in the department or in the section or in the college from both a revenue and expense standpoint. Very much like the foundation spend and the gift policies, they drive what's budgeted at those levels. Those budgets are determined at those levels from those external influences. They're validated by our budget office and our central finance area for the construction of the budget that you have in front of you. And then they are also monitored quite actively throughout the course of the year to make sure that they stay within budget from both a revenue and expense standpoint. So again, when we talk about the self-balancing accounts, that's what I'm referring to, is those self-balancing accounts where they have to stay in balance. The other area that I refer to it as it's a bit of the backbone or the foundation of the university budget is general funds. And those are the funds that we drive the estimates in terms of what are the revenues that are available from tuition and fees, state appropriations, and other sources that we fund the general and unrestricted activities across the campus. Those general funds touch pretty much every area of our campus, whereas the other pockets of those self-balancing funds are very specific to either colleges or departments for the most part. So as we go through the document, we will spend a lot of time on general funds because we want to make sure that we have those general funds absolutely right. And we also have provisions in case something doesn't go as planned in terms of general funds. So again, we have we're expecting about $1.219 billion of revenues in FY21. We also have some revenues that are actually cash that's actually received, or revenues that are actually received or booked in 2020 that will be used in 2021, about 5.5 million. You know, for example, if we have an activity that we collect cash for in the month of June and we have the activity in July or August, we'll have a kind of a mismatch. We'll have cash received in one period or revenue acknowledged in one period and the corresponding expenses in another. So some of that kind of bleeds over from one fiscal year to the next. Now, on the expense side, we have built the entire budget based on the assumptions that we talked about in the budget workshop. And most of those assumptions hover around that moderate category. Remember, there was kind of the best case, less moderate, moderate, and then severe. Most of the scenarios or most of the assumptions that we've made to build this budget are in that moderate category. Not the best, but not the worst. And as we built the budget and across especially the general funds, we've included things like the utility increases. We've included the increases in fringe benefits. We've also included the effects of restructuring the online tuition and fees for the impact it has on tuition and fees. And we've also budgeted a slight enrollment decrease, which we'll get into in a lot more detail in a few moments. But the sum total in the general funds of the difference between the revenues on in the revised state and the expenses without a correction is about $21 million. And that's the red number that you see at the bottom of that first-hand column. Now, we know we're not going to move forward with an imbalanced budget. And Jake, if you could turn the page. Okay. Just as we did at the end of fiscal year 20, as we looked at ways to balance and mitigate the $39 million worth of risk, we're doing the exact same thing to bring the 2021 budget back into line. And the primary levers, if you will, that we are going to use to do that is, number one, we're going to modify the employer contributions to the retirement. And also, we're going to encumber, if you will, some of the unit contingencies in the budgets. And let me explain the unit contingency a little more. Beginning last year, we asked colleges and units, all the operating units, to set 1% of their general fund appropriation into a separate account as a contingency account in case something happened during the year. You didn't have that committed to a specific purpose, but if something happened during the year, you had contingency funds to draw to meet that unexpected event. And it's really good we did that for the current year because we had to basically do that. And that was 1%. What we're doing next year is we're moving that 1% to 5% because we know some of this stuff is going to happen. It's just a matter of how much is it going to happen and when. So we're asking colleges to reserve 5%, colleges and units to reserve 5% of their general fund in a contingency account to meet unforeseen costs and unforeseen revenue shortfalls. And at this point, based on what we know now, with enrollment, with the restructuring of the pricing, with the expenses that we can reasonably expect with COVID-19, the increased expenses, and also for utilities and health insurance, we can pull the levers of the health insurance, or I'm sorry, the retirement, partially reducing the retirement contribution, and also pulling some of that contingency out of those college accounts. So that will balance that $21 million imbalance. Now, I mentioned the word flexibility a few moments ago. We need to have a budget that's flexible. And when I think of flexibility, what happens if things don't go according to plan? Let's take, for example, tuition takes a deeper dive or a greater shortfall than we're expecting, or we have greater expenses than we'd expected, unforeseen expenses and things like that. That's where we get into those available mitigation strategies in the middle of the page. And if you think of those as levers, Okay, but it's a lever of what do you pull and how hard do you pull it? You know, for example, we've already pulled the employer retirement contribution. So we've kind of scaled back on that a little bit, not totally eliminated it for the upcoming year, but
please leave your message for 50241787885.
Hello?
We can still hear you, but I don't know what that message was. We can still
Okay.
hear you, Dan.
Maybe we're being recorded on somebody's phone. So
Technical difficulty,
as the year unfolds and as things start to change, either good or bad, if we have to pull those other levers to be able to save money, just like we did at the end of this fiscal year, that's exactly what we have planned. You know, for example, in the employee retirement, recall for a 3-month period from May through the end of July, we stopped making contributions to that plan to be able to generate enough savings to get through the year. Now, in the current year budget, we're reinstating some of that. The base contribution was 7.5% with an optional 2.5% match. We pulled both of those down to 0 to get through the end of the fiscal year this year. Now, we will reinstate 2.5% of the base contribution, or we're budgeting to reinstate 2.5% of the base contribution and the 2.5% optional match. So we're going to put some of that back in for the new year budget. If the situation should start to deteriorate, that's a lever that we can pull back, and we can pull those back to 0 if we have to. The same thing with employee pay reductions. We are planning to reinstate the reductions that we implemented over the last 3 months of this fiscal year. We're going to reinstate those. But if situations deteriorate, that's a lever we can pull to start to generate some savings to help offset unforeseen events. The same thing with spending curtailments, and also we could pull a little harder on the unit contingencies. You know, right now we're only encumbering about 75% of those unit contingencies to balance this year's budget. If something goes wrong, we may have to pull the rest. So what we're trying to do is keep things flexible enough that we have the ability to be able to tap into or pull different levers to be able to generate savings. If revenues don't come in, then how do we offset that on an expense side? So again, we're very comfortable with where we're at in terms of the balancing. We're comfortable with the fact that we've got the tools to be able to invoke, if you will, to be able to help meet unforeseen circumstances as we get into the year. Now, of course, if we get into that most adverse category where everything, I call it the apocalyptic category, that's going to require some major and serious change. But that is truly the worst of the worst case scenarios. But based on what we have in front of us now and what we know, we have tried to build a budget based on that with enough flexibility to meet some unforeseen events as we move ahead. The chart right below that provides the same data only from a year ago to try to provide you with a year-over-year comparison of the expenses by those funding streams and by the categories of expense. In other words, what are we going to spend the money on? And if you flip the page, Jake, this is a difference. This is basically just a difference chart, the difference between 21 and 20 of where the differences are. And I'd like to provide you with a little bit of insight into why are there some differences between the years. And I'll go into general funds last, but on the Research Foundation, you'll see that there's about a $7.5 million decrease in both revenues and expenses. That's mainly two things. Number one is when we moved the clinical activities of the Department of Pediatrics off the university's books to Norton, both the revenues left and the expenses left. Okay, so that's a decrease. It's off our books. It's on theirs. The risk is on theirs. So the revenues and the expenses have moved. That's been partially offset by the fact that our health system is providing more funding than last year to the university and to the School of Medicine. So you've got a decrease, a larger decrease. It's offset by a smaller increase. but nonetheless, it is a decrease. You'll see athletics, excuse me, is decreased as Vince has downsized, if you will, the EULA budget to meet what he thinks is a situation he's going to be looking at in the fall and the spring. I have some increase in foundation year over year. I think what's happened is the current year, because we've had basically not a lot of activity on campus. We had a decrease in expense. But it's going to pick back up next year. And then also other departmental funds, a lot of that is residual grant funds and also overhead funds. As our overhead increases, the overhead we receive from federal grants increase, then that helps increase that other funding. So all in all, the self-balancing accounts, you'll see a lot of decreases, but again, primarily driven by the EULA decrease, and also the decrease related to clinical activities as a result of the movement of the clinical revenues and expenses from our books to Norton's books, if you will.
Dan?
Yes.
Okay, interrupt. Dr. Burse asked a question about why are we not using the budget document itself? And maybe if that could be clarified, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
Do you mind, Dr. Burse?
Hello? Is your mic on?
I believe it was in reference earlier when we were on the recommendation page before you started the formal presentation.
Okay. Can we get? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh, I'm here. I'm back on. The page before the one we're down on was not in the budget document itself, and so I'm trying to figure out why we're not using the budget document.
I understand.
Yeah, that's my fault. Actually, that came to me this morning as I was trying to think of a way to talk about those levers, and we just inserted that chart into the existing budget document. That's all. But the document is identical other than that, with the exception of one other summary page that we wanted to put into. We can send a new one out, but none of the numbers have changed. It's just a matter of a way to present how we have access to different ways to be able to invoke change. So, Jake, would you mind? Yeah, you got it. The other view that we wanted to provide is, we've talked about how are we spending the dollars, the tuition dollars, the grant dollars, the EULA dollars? How are you spending it by salaries, by wages, by operating expenses? We wanted to flip that just a little bit and show it in a little different view in terms of who's spending it. Whoops, wait a minute, Jake, next page. There you go. Who's spending it? And again, exact same revenue streams, only instead of looking at expenses by salaries and benefits, we're looking at the expenses by the individual colleges. And again, we've modeled this based on primarily the moderate risk category in terms of tuition revenues and also increased costs. The imbalance is the same, and the solution to the imbalance is identical as well. The other thing I'd like to, can you back up one slide, Jake? Okay, so again, I want to focus for a few moments on the general fund, because that is truly the kind of the backbone of the budget for the university. It touches every unit in one way, shape, or form, and we need to make sure that the funding, the revenue assumptions for it are absolutely as correct as possible, and that we've accounted for all the expenses and all the costs. So as we look at the activity or the difference in the general fund, you'll see that the year-over-year revenues that we expect next year compared to this year are about $1,725,000 less. And we would like to walk the board through the reason for that difference. And also the expenses are about $21 million greater. And we'd also like to walk you through that to make sure that you understand on the general fund, which is the true unrestricted, which are the true unrestricted dollars we have in the institution. You understand why the total revenues are decreasing and why the expenses are increasing. So, okay, would you mind flipping 2 slides, Jake? Okay, so let's talk about the revenue changes first. And the revenues are changing basically because of four things. Decreases in tuition and fees, decreases in investment income when the Fed dropped the federal funds rate down to basically zero. We were counting on that in the past. Investments of idle cash to be able to generate revenue to help fund general fund expenses. With the interest rate drop, that's about 1.4 million. We also had an increase in our state performance funding. There's a little more detail in the text, but we did better in about, I believe, like 7 of the categories. So as a result of that, we picked up about $400,000. And we also will have some increases in housing revenues. But in terms of the tuition and fees, the very first one I mentioned, tuition and fees will be about $1 million less this year compared to last year. And we wanted to spend some time in the document walking through why is it less, and it's less because of a few things. And the first section is because of the pricing structure of online tuition. Our online tuition was priced very differently than our face-to-face tuition. And given a hybrid approach, it's not practical, reasonable, and not fair, frankly, to be able to continue that. Okay. We learned that over the summer. We had to equalize them over the summer. This continues that approach. Okay. So we will lose about $6.9 million worth of revenue because of that restructuring. And in the individual pockets of why is, number one is on online, we used to charge for online when a student exceeded a certain threshold. Over 12 hours, we would charge for the 13th, 14th, and 15th. Now, since we're treating online just as face-to-face, there's no charge above that cap. So that means that that's about $6.3 million worth of revenue we won't collect. The second piece is we start to equalize the rates. We were charging a little more we were charging about $540, I believe it was. We're charging an online rate for residents, and we were also, the non-resident students were paying almost the same rate, okay, or the same rate. So we're eliminating that online fee to equalize those, so we lose a little there. But because a credit hour is a credit hour, and a non-resident pays a certain credit hour and a resident pays a certain credit hour, it doesn't matter. There's no online rate. So because the non-resident students were actually paying a little less of a credit hour rate in the old environment, because they'll pay the normal non-resident rate, we'll pick up about $1.6 million worth of new revenue to help offset some of those decreases. So the change in the online rate structure generates about a $6.9 million revenue loss. So the second piece that contributes to the loss is up one, not that one. There you go. At the very bottom of the page. We're budgeting a modest decrease in enrollment, and that modest decrease translates to just a touch under $4 million. And the decrease is about 220 heads. We're looking at about a decrease of 303 undergraduates, with an increase of about 100 head count in graduates and about a 20 decrease in professional. And I think those numbers are identical to the ones that we used in the budget workshop. So we've got the decrease because of the price restructuring, and we've got a decrease because of the modest decrease in enrollment. Now, let me say that even though we budgeted a decrease in enrollment, that doesn't mean we are complacent and just working toward that number. We are working toward a much higher number each and every day. So I just want you to, I think it's important for the board to understand that we're not, we're setting our sights well above that number. It's just for the purpose of what we're doing here and setting a budget, we want to be somewhat conservative and make sure that we know what we have when the year starts. Okay. Can you flip the page now, Jake? All right. Another area that we are recommending is actually offsets those decreases that we mentioned a few moments ago, and those are increases in tuition and fees. 2% for resident students, undergrad resident students, and 2%, a 2% increase for non-resident students. Back when we looked at this on the budget, in the budget workshop, we were looking at the same amount for both resident and non-resident, and we've changed that strategy a little bit because we've also tweaked the request on the online. So we are seeking approval of a 2% increase for both resident and non-resident undergraduate students. In terms of graduate, $130 for each, both resident and non-resident. And also on the professional ranks, law is the same thing. It'll be the same amount for both resident and non-resident. On the other professional schools, a 3% increase for dentistry students and a 2.5% increase for medicine students. So the amounts will be different, resident versus non-resident, which is a little different than the graduate in the law school. But those are the fee increase recommendations that we are putting forward. And there's also there's a board resolution item that has those in a little greater detail that I think Jake sent out yesterday. And there's a chart, table 3 basically just provides a rundown of where those decreases, how all those decreases combined and those increases combined roll into the tuition and fee budget. And again, the other things that round out that 1.7 million decrease in general fund expenses are the investment income, the state performance upside or upswing, and also housing revenues. And speaking of housing revenues, there are charts attached beginning on page 8. Do you mind flipping the page, Jake? One more. There you go. There are charts attached by housing facility and by room type in terms of what we're requesting. And if there's any questions in terms of the fee increase or the housing increases, be happy to answer them now before we move on to the expense increases on the general fund. Okay, well, anybody? No, okay. Okay, so Jake, can you go? There you go. Okay, so we've covered the increases in the general fund or the changes in revenue. When we look at the changes in expenses on the general fund, about $21.2 million. The bottom two, the housing and the various unit operatings, below that, there's about $4 million of those costs that have revenues behind them. So higher revenues, higher expenses. They flow through for a net of zero. But there's about $17 million worth of costs that we've had to accommodate within the budget. Ranging from annualizations and recognition of some college and unit allocations, startup funds, continuation of startup funds, dean's commitments, things like that. We're also annualizing the cost of living increase that was implemented in January of last year. It was 6 months. So now we need to budgetarily accommodate another 6 months this year. The next piece is we need to start accruing some dollars or setting some dollars aside to replace our computing systems, our computing system rather, everything from financial to student to HR and personnel systems. And although that's about a $5 million per year cost for probably at least the next 7 or 8 years, we're planning, we need to put some money aside and start that in December and just kind of get it started. Because if we lose those systems, we're pretty much out of business. We also have health insurance cost increase of a little over $2 million, and we're looking at some utility increases, along with continuing to fund the institutional aid as tuition increases. We try to keep some pace with that with institutional aid for the need-based students to help offset some of that. Okay. So would you mind turning the page? Okay, so to summarize all this, $1.2 billion operating budget that we're asking for approval of today, and that operating budget will fund all the activities, the university-based activities on the campuses. Again, it's balanced after those mitigation strategies that we've identified, but we also feel that we have enough flexibility as other things come up. We can pull those other levers, and including the contingency accounts. And it's also designed to maintain stability. And we've tried to make sure that there's enough funding directed to the right missions to be able to meet the missions. And the other thing that, frankly, I think bodes well is the fact that although there is a decrease in our tuition revenues because of the online restructuring. I think that actually benefits us because it sets us a little, it makes us a little different than some other institutions. And it also allows greater seamlessness in terms of students who take classes between online and face-to-face. And it also is more affordable. Because our tuition revenues go down, then that means that students are paying less. So there are a vast majority of students who will pay less under that scenario, under the new tuition restructuring. And the last thing that I'd like to spend just a few moments on in terms of the budget is that even though we talk about mitigating strategies and trying to do more with less, we have tried to preserve some things in the budget, especially around employees and especially around students. For example, the current year, the 21 budget that we're proposing does continue the 2% raise that we put in place last January. We've restored the pay reductions that were implemented at the end of this fiscal year, so it restores those. We have not passed the increase, although our health insurance costs are increasing, we are not passing those back to the employees. We are not increasing parking fees. We're just not doing that. And we're also maintaining the tuition remission programs. And we're also trying to restore the employer retirement contribution. For a 3-month period, we had to take it down to 0. We can't take it back up to where it once was because of some of the risks that we're facing, but we can start to incrementally restore some of that, and that's exactly what this budget does. And last but not least is this budget does not, at this point, does not have provisions for general mass furloughs like a lot of other institutions are doing. So we're trying to protect both the people, the students, and the academic programs as much as we can within the fiscal constraints that we have. Okay. The last thing, and I won't go into them in great detail unless someone would like to, but I mentioned a few moments ago that we're trying to frame the budget through different lenses or look at the budget through different lenses. And one of the things that we've tried to do is to give you a little deeper understanding and a little deeper clarity in terms of how each and every unit is funded. And in the remaining section of the budget document, we've taken each and every unit on their general funds, because that's where the real kind of action is, if you will. We've looked at each and every unit's 2 years worth of actual expenses, budget for this year, budget for next year. And just so the members of the board and the committee can gain an understanding of what units are funded at what levels and how do they spend those dollars. And there's a couple things that I'd like to highlight as you look through those. And number one is there is a special line for reserves. Each unit will have a line for the reserves. I've talked about that contingency, the 5% contingency for next year. It is partitioned off from the rest of the budget within the college. It is identifiable and it is visible. And you'll see that those dollars are separately identified, separated within the budget. So you'll see those contingencies, they really stand out. The other thing is that we've also done a comparison of last year's budget to this year's budget in both dollars and percentage. And there have been some changes since last year's budget that may skew the percentages. So I just want you to be aware of that. For example, last year's beginning budget number did not include the dollar value of the raise that we did in July, because we didn't know. The raise we did in January, my mistake, because we didn't have solid numbers to put in a July budget for raises in January because it was 6 months difference. So when you compare a January of budget for, a July budget for last year to a July budget of this year, the 2% raise will be in this year, but will not be in last year. Also, this year we'll have the health insurance increase in it, whereas last year's won't. So when you add those two together, that automatically gets you between a 3 and a 3.5% difference between last year and this year. So if a unit is 2% greater next year compared to last year, we didn't view those as notable differences. But if they were over that, we provided some insight into why were they over that. A lot of it was unit shifting from one place to another. An activity would move from HR, for example, to the president's office. The dollars would move, but those dollars last year were in HR, this year in their president's office. Makes it look like the president's office may have increased, but when you step back from an institutional standpoint, there was no increase. It was more of a change of program. So again,
Dan?
just a couple of high-level things to look out for when you go through those budget comparisons by the unit.
Dan, this is Diane. I've got a quick
Yes,
question.
ma'am.
Just
Yes,
for those of us who are more familiar with for-profit accounting, when you talk about this contingency, you're budgeting for a contingency, but then you're also saying you're budgeting for using it, correct? So is this the same dollars we're talking about?
No. Let's take, for example, Diane, I'm going to budget $5 in a unit, and I'm building that in the expense budget, and I'm budgeting $5 for tuition revenue. Well, let's say that $5 of tuition revenue is really $4, so we have an imbalance. So what we will do is we will reduce that $5 contingency expense budget by $1 to keep everything in balance.
But it's basically, you're just telling each area not to budget all of their money, correct?
We're telling them they can budget their money, but they have to partition 5% of it for unforeseen events. If those unforeseen events don't happen, we can release that contingency back into their budget, and they can, they can fill the positions they need or things like that. But if we need that money to offset tuition losses or unforeseen costs, then we pull it physically out of the budget, out of their budget.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question around that, or is it clear to everyone what he's saying?
It's almost like a reserve for bad debt.
I understand.
Diane, how you put it is exactly right. The way I would say is we're telling them you can't spend everything.
Right. Till we know more about how the year is going to be.
That's correct. And then we're saying we're not going to sweep it. If everything goes well, you still get to spend it. That's the difference, because people are afraid
Okay.
that it won't be for their unit.
Dan, could you go back to that expense item for the ERP system? Can you
Yes, ma'am.
a little bit about what is that going to be spent during this fiscal year? That was a little bit unclear from your presentation.
I think Rayhan is on in the meeting, but I think the answer to that is yes. I think they're ramping up to hire some help in terms of identifying what we need and getting some RFPs out on the street and things like that. Rayhan, would you like to? Oh, we're on mute.
Yeah, I think, Dan, the confusion that I have, and I don't know if this is what Diane is speaking to, is I think that was a $2.5 million line item. And I think the words you used were set aside, which is why it was like, well, are we spending it or are we not spending it? If we're setting it aside, it sounds like we're not spending it.
Let me clarify that. Let me replace set aside with make a budgetary commitment to $2.5 million. We need to make a budgetary commitment to start spending money on that ERP system. It's about a $5 million annual cost. And Rayhan has a project budget. He estimates about $5 million annually, and we need to start it. We need to start this year. And what I've told him is, you've got $2.5 million to get it started this year. I know it's going to be $5 million per year, but we've got to get it started. So the expectation is he'll spend that.
Why don't you go back to that page?
Jake, it's like one up.
What up?
Yeah, one before.
Okay.
So this is Rayhan. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, so basically between now and through the fall, we're going to complete our planning process, which includes, we've already had several, very diverse working groups looking at vendors. We've outlined a couple of vendors, and then we need to do a deeper dive on those vendors. We want the committees to, the functional areas, to help us decide which vendor and which product they prefer. After that, we may go with an RFP process. So all of this is going to take time, and most likely we won't be at a signed contract until past this calendar year. So that's kind of our plan, and before we do that, we fully anticipate coming to the board and giving you an update on exactly how we plan to move forward.
Raymond, did you have any questions on any of these other items?
No, I guess the way I would say is the page we're looking at is additional expenditures that are being authorized this year. And those additional expenditures is what put the budget in the $20 million unbalanced. And then you're going to do those other reductions on the other sheet to cover that $20 million is probably a better way to look at it.
Yeah, the combination of this and the shortfalls in the revenues. I mean, if we wouldn't have restructured our online fees and we would have done a 2% fee increase, we would have had enough to cover a fair amount of this stuff. It's kind of the combination of the impacts on the decreases in revenues and the increases in cost.
It's just a presentation in terms of how it's set out there. I think I understand what's going on.
Okay.
Dan, is there anything else that you need to brief us on the budget?
Well, no, other than I would like to publicly thank Rick Grissarek to my right, socially distanced to my right. Rick led a budget process through pretty turbulent waters, lots of changes very quickly, and he led it masterfully. And I'd also like to thank the staff in the budget and planning office, Julia Collins, Jill Mullaney, Priscilla Kingle, Kareem Islai, and Jennifer Novak. And I'd also like to also publicly thank Trustee Chilton. We dragged him into Grummeyer Hall on a couple of afternoons to talk with him about how to present this in a way that through a trustee's eyes, it would make sense. And he was very beneficial and very helpful. And sir, we thank you for taking time out of your day to do that.
Okay, are there any other questions or anything else we want Dan to clarify?
Diane, this is John. I don't have a question. I'd just like to make a short statement, if that's okay.
Sure.
And this is hard for me. I know it's hard for a lot of people. One of the levers that we pulled involved reinstating pay for people that had to pay reductions. And on one hand, I'm really happy for those people because some of those are staff. The staff senate represents those people that make over $100,000, just like we do the ones below the $100,000 line. But I just want us to be aware that the optics, and we talk about optics a lot in here, that the optics for those staff making below 100,000 that may still be subject to furloughs while their peers are having their pay restored is hard for them to understand and hard for them to, just hard for them to embrace. I will say shared governance and administration are coming together to try to address people in that scenario. We had a really productive meeting this morning with Brad Schaefer and his group, Keith Thomas, Hope McLaughlin, Josh Hawkins and his group, and Michael Wade Smith and myself to talk about fundraising to be able to help people that are still going to be in furlough situations, extending past what the current end of the Federal CARES Act will be, because that's when they really start to become even more severely impacted. But the bigger thing is COVID has revealed to us a larger scale problem. More and more of our staff are becoming more and more reliant on overtime and part-time jobs to bridge the gap in the increasing the increasing space between their salaries that have stayed stagnant for a long time other than the 2% in January and continuing increases in the cost of living. Our share committee is hearing stories about people who we repaired somebody's car because we found out that was also their apartment, and we're finding out staff that are paying their rent on credit cards every month and incurring
more and more debt every month because their part-time jobs have gone away because of COVID. And I just want to say to the board that we really appreciate the contributions of everyone here. Everybody on this board has contributed to the SHARE program. Those are allowing us to address some of those things, but with the things that we've recently learned with COVID, we have to start getting our arms around understanding that SHARE isn't a sustainable solution to what we're finding out is probably a much longer term problem. And we can't let ourselves get in the mindset, I think, of thinking of SHARE as the cure-all for people in this situation. And, you know, because it's a month to month to month thing for them, and that could extend for a long, long time. So I appreciate everybody's work. I appreciate Dan and Rick and the things they've done, the people that met with me this morning. But I just wanted to take the opportunity to make sure I got that ongoing problem out in front of our group. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We do need to make sure that we hear from you constituent representatives, because you're hearing things that we may hear occasionally, but you're hearing them regularly. Any other comments or questions? If not, could I get a motion, a second, to approve this budget?
So moved.
Okay. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposition or abstention votes? Okay, if not, that's going to be approved. Now, I think it's the last item, is our update from the CFO. So Dan, do you want to please give us an update on where we stand for this fiscal year and any other items that you feel pertinent?
Okay. Jake, would you mind popping the financial results period ended April 30th? There you go. Go ahead and just hit the next slide if you would. Kind of in summary, the numbers are in the packet, but we are trending better than last year, but we're also trending back on target. Remember, we were on target to the beginning of March when COVID-19 popped up, and we were faced with a lot of risk. We developed a plan to bring it back into line, and that's exactly what we did. And we're trending better than last year, number one, but we're also trending right back to a balanced budget situation. So, I'm very, very, very confident that we are going to end the year with a balanced budget. I mean, I look at the numbers almost each and every day, and it appears that we are right back to a good spot, and also that cash is stable. And if you could turn to page 2 pages, Jake, one more, there you go. At the end of April, on an accrual basis, you'll see that bottom line, when you exclude the kind of the noise of the capital gifts, that capital, that $143 million, is basically the value of the buildings that were transferred to us by Kentucky One. So it's not cash, it's more the value of buildings. So you have to take that out of revenues to get to what are the actual business revenues and business expenses of the organization. And you'll see that the revenues are over expenses by about $31 million on that very bottom line in yellow, compared to being under by about 11 for last year. So although we're $43 million better than last year, the thing that happened last year was we had some pretty significant revenue inflows in June that brought that negative back up. But at the same time, we're going to be spending that 31 down, because we have expenses through the months of May and June. So just because we have a positive 31 right now, that I can guarantee you that's not going to hold. But what we'll see at the end of the year will be lower, but it'll be balanced. Okay? And if you could turn the page 2 pages, Jake. Cash and liquidity has always been a concern. Well, it was a concern, but we've been improving steadily, and you'll see that improvement continues. And not to be flippant, but we're doing this the old-fashioned way, and that is we are not holding bills. We are not holding payments. We are just managing budgets. We're managing expenses, making sure that the accounts receivable is worked and cash is turned and that kind of thing. So cash has improved over last year, and last year was actually a little bit better than the year before. So we're kind of back on that road of being able to build our liquidity up and make sure that we have cash to be able to function and also meet some of those challenges ahead. And if you could turn to one more. There you go. And the first line of that liquid cash, that's from the prior slide. But when we start to layer where we also have some access to cash, you'll see that that's just as stable as well. The EULA short-term investments in it are a little down because we pulled some money out of that. But we've never touched the line of credit and don't plan to unless it's an extreme emergency. And we also have some ample cash over in the foundation that we draw on continually, but we've certainly not tapped that bank, if you will, to nothing. So we are in a good stable cash position. We continue to maintain a good stable cash position. And one more, again, just to reiterate. We're better than last year. We're trending toward a positive budget, very confident about positive budget. The campus really rose to the occasion on COVID-19 risk mitigation and helped us bring things back into line and end the year in a good state. And we're also in a good state of cash. So if my parting words on this year is the board can rest easy because the financial statements at the end of the year will show good results and good stable results. So if there's any questions on year to date through April? Okay. Jake, would you mind popping the pediatrics? One of the reasons that we're actually doing better this year than last year is there were a couple of game-changing transactions at our Health Sciences Center. One was the acquisition of the Kentucky One assets, which Tom Miller is going to talk about in a few moments. But the other occurred at the beginning of March, and it was the transition or the integration of our pediatric clinical activity with Norton. Historically, we operated as two, but we were kind of joined by contractual commitments between the two. It never really meshed as one. And we went through at least a 1.5, maybe a 2-year process to try to integrate those clinical practices. And we completed that at the beginning of March, and they have been integrated since the beginning of March. And we wanted to provide the board with an update of where we were at. What were our objectives? What did we want to achieve? Where are we at today from both a quantitative and a qualitative standpoint, if you will, numeric and non-numeric? And, for example, we wanted to expand our revenue base. We wanted to expand our reputation. We also wanted to expand our impact. We wanted to take care of more kids in a larger footprint. We also wanted to do that through increased faculty, and we also wanted to increase it through a broader array and a greater array of programs. And we've tried to address each one of those points in terms of objectives and the status of those objectives. And I won't go through them all, but it's been pretty significant. And since I'm the money guy, I'll talk about the second one, and that is to the reduction of overhead and operating deficits. Pediatrics, because we did not have our own dedicated teaching hospital, they were rather limited in terms of hospital revenue streams, tapping into hospital revenue streams. And that was a challenge to them. And because of that, they functioned at a loss over at least the last 3 years, pretty significant losses. And in addition to that, they built a building, the Novak Center building, and the university was a guarantor of rents on that building. So that actually had a negative impact on the university's credit profile. So you have a mortgage out there. We're the second holder of a mortgage. So when we integrated the practices, we removed all the clinical activities off our books, and we also sold the Novak Center to Norton through a group called the Pediatric Endowment Fund. We sold that building, and that relieved us of our obligations. So from a financial standpoint, this integration did two things. The first of which is it helped our credit profile with Moody's because it removed that obligation to that annual rent. And Jake, if you could go back to the slide that says financial status. Other way. Oh, one more. No. No. Wrong day. One more. One more. There you go. Okay. So to show the impact that this integration has had on the finances of the University of Louisville through the beginning, through the implementation period until it began, through the end of February, the department had lost about $7 million between the department and the subspecialties, the pediatric activity and the subspecialties. They had lost about $7 million. And the whole purpose of the integration was to move the clinical activities to Norton, take advantage of synergies, treat everything, operate a pediatric clinical activity as one as opposed to two. And that's exactly what happened. When we removed those, our clinical revenues decreased, our clinical expenses decreased, and our losses decreased. And you'll see that at the bottom of the page, on the pre-integration side, we were losing about almost $900,000 a month in pediatrics. And now, because we've shifted all of that activity, Norton does the billings, they manage the clinical schedules, they manage the collections, they manage all of that, and they take full responsibility and have all the risk for that. That removed those losses from our books. So we went from losing $885,000 a month to basically even. And you'll see how that unfolds over March and April's actuals. And we did this a few weeks ago, so we didn't have May's actuals. But in May and June, the system, the whole process and the whole system was designed to maintain that break even on the university side. But there's also a provision for us to be able to tap in to incremental revenues when that happens, but it hasn't happened because of COVID-19. So we are very happy. I think I can speak for the Dean of our School of Medicine in that we're happy the way this turned out. Happy in terms of the impact it's had on the finances, happy in terms of the impact it's had on our faculty, and happy in terms of the impact that it's had on the community to be able to serve the community and their children as one provider as opposed to two sets of providers. So again, this is it's actually a project that I'm really proud of, and we just wanted to make sure that the board understood. You authorized us to move forward with the transaction, and we wanted to give you an update on the post-transaction results.
Yeah, Dan, this is Mary. I have a question. Maybe Tony's the best person to answer it. I mean, kudos to you and Tom Hoy and Dr. Gansel and everybody that worked on getting this done, because I know it was incredibly complicated, and it looks like particularly the financial objectives that we have are being met. I'm just curious how Norton is feeling about the integration, how the physicians are, how that integration is going between the physicians that used to be ours that are now theirs. If you could just provide some color on that, please.
I'd be happy to do that. We have regular meetings with Dr. Hester and the Norton leadership. We've got a very effective JPAC, which is the Joint Pediatric Academic Committee. The faculty are actually integrating very well. Even the neonatologists, which we felt like were probably our most challenging group. Kim Boland is doing a superb job as the department chair of pediatrics. And I think most of the faculty, while they had trepidation coming in, are very pleased with how things have gone so far. And as Dan said, this has not only financially been very beneficial, strategically it's been beneficial as well. So I think that there, certainly some challenges, but the good so far outweighs the bad, and I'm very grateful to the board for making this decision.
Madam Chair, are we ready to move on to Mr. Miller?
Yes, please.
All right.
Dan, can you hear me okay?
Certainly can, Tom.
I'm just going to give a brief update in regard to, for the Finance Committee, in regard to what we committed to back about 9 months ago, 10 months ago, and where we're at today. So we had some objectives when we looked at the acquisition of Kentucky One Health. First of all, that was to maintain all the service lines that exist today, including keeping the heart transplant going, the CV program, and making sure that our residents had a place. There were 68 residents at Jewish Hospital, making sure they had a place to provide services. Secondly, retain all the Kentucky One employee levels. And as you know, there were about 6,000 employees at Kentucky One Health. Third was the university benefited from the relationship with CHI in that approximately $30 million of direct payments were made to the university, and also additional money of about $15 million of revenues that were provided as a result of the patients that were seen at the CHI facilities. And fourth was to make sure that this was not a financial drain on the university. And that was, we were in a situation where the previous 12 months they had lost $44 million. And we identified synergies to you that we believe that would improve the financial performance. And so those were our objectives. Jake, if you go forward. Just in the first aspect, as you know, with Neely's terrific help, we were able to get a $35 million loan from the state. One of the key criteria was making sure that the employment status would stay the same and that we would meet a certain benchmark of full-time employees that live in Kentucky. That the KEDFA commitment is listed here. It's 5,880 full-time associates who live in Kentucky that work for us. We currently at 6,379, and that number is growing some because volume is improving, and we're moving the billing side of what CHI did through Conifer. We're moving those individuals who were out of state and out of country. We're hiring new people in the community to do that billing. And so we still believe that we meet all of the triggers associated with that. So that's a positive from our standpoint.
Tom,
yes.
When you go off of that page, is the only obligation to forgiveness is an employment and wage goals only? Because we never, as one board member, never saw the final what those obligations were.
Yeah, the obligations are really twofold. One is it's an and or, and so this is an or. We have to, if we meet this obligation alone, we will get the loan forgiveness. If we didn't meet this, we have an or where we provide a certain level of services in the west side or in rural communities. We also meet that criteria. And so we meet both of those today, but the criteria isn't going to be measured for 5 more years because the loan forgiveness doesn't occur to year 6.
Understand that, but we need to be on top of that. I would appreciate getting more detail around that.
Yeah, well, again, this is the criteria. If we meet this criteria, we receive the loan forgiveness. If we didn't, there's an or, but that or we will easily meet also, just in regard to providing additional resources.
You got a twofold obligation, and I guess what I'm asking for was, we saw the 2-page thing with KIFTA when it was done, and what the obligations were going to be worked out. We've never, I as one board member have never seen what the obligations are. And you tell me we're going to meet them, it's fine, but I also have an obligation to track and understand what those obligations are.
Sure. But if we meet this obligation, we don't have any further criteria we have to meet. So this one alone allows us to have the loan forgiveness, just this one.
So, Tom,
Dr. Burse, I think, just wants to see
Mr.
the
Burse,
final.
we will send all of you a copy, but immediately following this. But as Tom said, I just want to reiterate that the KEDFA commitments were 5,880 jobs to be maintained and wages about $35 an hour, And that was supposed to be met at the end of 5 years, but we are happy to say that we already meet it, and we have to continue meeting it because our wages, thanks to the good work of Tom and the whole team, the current wage is at $41 an hour, and we have exceeded the number that's asked. And even though if we didn't meet these two, the or was we could also show our investments in West Louisville and rural Kentucky. But those are important to us, so we are pursuing that anyway. And the UFL Health Board, we're talking about it and we'll bring it back. But your point's well taken. Mr. Burse will make sure that we send you and all of you, the final document that was signed, which will actually corroborate what we just said.
And if you wonder why the $41 that we're having, it seems so high, it's because this does include our physicians and their salaries into it. So it artificially inflates that number. But we clearly meet both of those criteria. Okay, Jake. In regard to support, and I want to broadly talk about this, I'm not sure that the university board is aware of the support that is provided to the university by U of L Health. And so I wanted to show you a slide. First of all, you can see Jewish Hospital, Mary Elizabeth, Shelbyville, Peace, and Fraser, where that $30 million commitment is being moved forward to the 2021 budget year. So this represents the 2021 budget year. And so within the Kentucky One facilities, we're budgeting about $32 million of support to go to the School of Medicine. That support's made up of a lot of components: academic support for residents, support for the AAA agreement, where there is either mission support or support through the clinical focus of taking university positions and having medical directorships associated with that, or just support in general in regard to recruitment. And so that commitment is still in place. It is about $32 million. U of L Hospital, you can see the numbers at U of L Hospital. We provide about $84 million to the school. Again, academic support, rent payment, resident support, which is a pass-through. We get reimbursed that, but that money is the mechanism we can pay the residents. Overall mission support, AAA agreement, which I described as a lot of components. It is both mission support and medical directorships that we have, and income guarantees where we're recruiting doctors. And in addition to that, the U of L Hospital also makes a mission support payment of $4.4 million to the university. We see that number will grow. And then IGT, although IGT is provided to the federal government, it is as a result of the ULP physicians, academic physicians, providing care to patients, Medicaid patients, that money flows. So in total, we provide about $148 million of support to the university. And I know there's been this feeling that in this process, there's concern that the university might have to be on the hook financially for U of L Health. I will say just the opposite. Dan mentioned something earlier. We have committed half of our overage in our budget that will provide an additional mission support to the university. And if you can go forward, you'll see where we're at today. So operational performance, Kentucky One Health's deficit at acquisition was approximately $44 million. We had a budget. We presented to you a budget for the time frame from November 1 to May 31st. So that 8-month stub period, that we would lose about $14.9 million, so about $15 million in this. Our actual performance during this time is that we're actually above budget by $36 million. A lot of reasons for that. We were able to take some additional IGT money that we held back in reserve because we were unsure whether this were real money that we were receiving or not. Those were generally volume adjustments that would have been made if the volumes went down, and we were concerned that the volumes would go down. But when working with the state, because of COVID-19, they made a decision that they would hold us harmless in regard to any volume changes. So we're able to take that in. And our synergies that we identified synergies that we thought would take us 3 years to occur. We're going to get all of them done by year 2, and much of them has happened already. And then the U of L Health budget overall, which is the budget for University Medical Center, the physician practices, and all of the Kentucky One facilities, which is Mary Elizabeth, Shelbyville, Jewish, Peace. That budget was $24.9, and right now through May, our actual number is $62,836,000. And so we're approximately $38 million ahead of budget from where we anticipated being at a time where COVID-19 has had a tremendous effect on hospitals. From our hospital perspective, March, April, and May, we were down approximately 50% in volumes overall. But we did some cost savings associated with that. We had some additional savings that we're able to get through in regard to the synergies. And then we received some stimulus money from the federal government that allowed us to maintain our revenue streams in any additional cost. And so the difference in those two numbers right now, the $38 million, half of that would be made as a mission support statement payment to the university. So at approximately, that's approximately less than $20 million that we are glad the medical center exists for the teaching and academic purposes of the university. And if we do well, we want and are glad to share that with the university. And so we anticipate having some payment of additional mission support in that $18 to $20 million going to the university. So financials have been good. Jake, you want to go to the next page? And so I would just say a couple things. We made commitments, and you made a leap of faith in allowing us to go forward with Kentucky One Health and the purchase. But I will tell you, we've honored every commitment that we've made, and we're ahead of every component that we told you we would do with in doing this. We've honored every commitment to the university, to the Commonwealth, our physicians, to the state, and to our community. And so I would tell you, it's been an excellent transition so far. A lot of issues that are out there still going on. We're always working on things, but it's been a good acquisition to date.
Thank you, Tom. Dan, is there anything else you feel like Tom should cover for this report?
No, the only other thing is Tom mentioned the revenue distribution. The one thing though is it's pending audit. We don't want to distribute anything until we know kind of what's left to distribute. It's pending audit, and it's also dependent upon kind of the cash position at the hospital. The last thing we want to do is jeopardize the cash position at the hospital. But again, it's very encouraging. I mean, we entered into something with large negative numbers, and we expected a little smaller negative numbers, but we're doing better than that. So I think all good indicators for a good positive future.
And just as a reminder, I serve on the board of the U of L Health in the finance chair role, as well as the board of trustees. So we're developing a lot of synergy and good communication. And I appreciate that, Tom, from your group.
And let me just say for Diane is an excellent financial chair, and she holds us accountable. So you have somebody who's well representing you on the U of L Health Board and the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Tom. All right, I think that wraps up our agenda, except for the last item you've got here, Dan. What about U of L, the budget and spending policy for ULF and ULRF?
Yes, as part of the process, the foundation is to share its spending policy with the board, and that's exactly what you have in front of you is the actual document that Keith, and I don't know if Keith's on the phone or Keith's on the call or not, but this is what was presented to and approved by the foundation board that kicks off the endowment, the allocation of endowment spend, and also gift spend and the funding for the advancement function at the university. And these numbers, oops, I'm sorry.
Yeah, these were the numbers used in our budgeting for the university, correct?
Yes, yes.
Keith, are you on? Do you want to make a report of any kind or say a few words?
Diane, I'm on. Yes, and good afternoon. I think Dan has said that. We worked closely with the university, more so than I think we have in the past. And the university did a lot of work in coming up with a 3-year projected expense in terms of what their needs were from their endowment and non-endowed gift accounts. We've looked at that. We've had to be cautious because of COVID. We have a substantial number of our accounts are at least 1% underwater. And so, we really wanted to make sure we could provide as much for fiscal year 21 and still put us in the best possible position for recovery so we can continue to provide at least as much as this going forward beyond FY21. And so, there's a lot of carryover available to the university. There are non-endowed gifts available to the university in addition to the fee that you see, which is a 3% spending policy allocation to the units. I will say most of our accounts, I just want to make sure everybody understands, most of our accounts, particularly in the endowment, but also our non-endowed gifts, are restricted by donor in terms of purpose. And so whether those be for scholarships or for salaries, endowed chairs, faculty positions, et cetera, very little is what any of us would consider unrestricted to use for general operations. And so we've balanced all of those considerations with working with Dan and Rick and their teams. And I think we've come up with a very appropriate level. I'll also tell you that overall our budget, and you can see it, we've reduced our operating expenses. And I think we'll end up in a net positive position. The only unknown is the stock market. And so we need the market to cooperate, but we feel good about the budget, and we were pleased our board approved this about 30 days ago.
Good. And I just want to compliment you all because I know there's been a lot of progress at the foundation level on being good stewards, and you've come a long way from our darker days. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan, what about ULREF? Or is there more here? Do we want to look at?
No, it's just kind of a consolidated report from the foundation in terms of both the endowment and then also the real estate foundation. Really no action required.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else that any member of the Finance Committee or any of our guests would like to cover? This has been a marathon meeting so far. All right. Could I get a motion and a second to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstain or any people abstaining or voting no? All right, so that motion carries. So we're now adjourned and we can move on to the next committee.
That would be the Research Foundation Executive Committee. Jim Rogers, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon again, everyone. I'd like to welcome and thank you for joining this virtual meeting of the Executive and Compensation Committee of the Research Foundation Board of Directors. As we proceed with our agenda, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. I will now call the roll of the committee. Mary Nixon.
Here.
Raymond Burse.
Here.
Diane Medley.
Here.
Benita Black.
Unmute here.
All right, thank you. John Smith.
Here.
And Jim Rogers, I'm here. Having determined a quorum is present, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Our next item of business is the approval of a research agreement with Norton's for pediatrics. Tom Hoy, would you brief the committee, please?
Glad to do that. As Dan was discussing, we went through the Norton pediatric integration at the beginning of March. That was a process that took about 1.5 years. As we got towards the conclusion of the agreements there, we were not able to complete this research agreement at the time that we implemented the other integration. So since the beginning of the year, the research group at the university and the research group at Norton have been working towards finalizing a document which addresses the respective responsibilities and roles of the parties in continuing the research efforts in the pediatric area, much of which will occur at Norton Hospital. And so this agreement requires the approval of the board, or in this case, executive committee of the Research Foundation, which is a party to the agreement. And also it will be on the agenda for the executive committee of the Board of Trustees. So it is finally ready for approval after some significant months of negotiation.
Jim Rogers is muted.
I apologize. Thank you, Tom. Any questions of Tom?
Raymond Burst, does this have to be approved today?
It's ready for approval. It doesn't have to be approved today. It's if there are concerns or questions about it, be glad to answer them.
My only concern was I guess we got it Tuesday night and had to review 255 pages. I didn't get through these 30 pages, and my preference is if we got a July meeting coming, let's put it on the July agenda.
That's not my call, but I certainly understand your. It's been a scramble to try to get it ready for this committee, and the lawyers for Norton on this matter, Ropes and Gray in Boston, have been a challenge, and so that's the primary reason that it didn't get to you farther in advance of this meeting. We can certainly deal with it in July. It's been something that the parties have been working for together in good faith during the interim while we didn't have a written agreement. So I'm sure that they will be able to function for another 30 days if that's the board's pleasure.
Any disagreements with Raymond's suggestion to postpone this to July? I think, Raymond, you raised a good point. So let's postpone this to the July meeting to vote on this. Having no other business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved. Second.
Second. Thank you. All in favor, please signify aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Our last committee is the Executive Committee of the Board of Trustees. Chair Nixon, you may begin.
Okay, I think you all heard this opening comment, but I'm going to make it again anyway. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining this virtual meeting of the Executive and Compensation Committee of the Board of Trustees. As we proceed with our agenda, please remember to mute your microphone when you're not speaking. I will now call the roll of the committee. Mary Nixon, I'm obviously here. Raymond?
Here.
Diane?
Here.
Benita?
I'm here.
Jim?
Here.
John?
I'm here.
Having determined a quorum present, I would like to call this meeting to order. The first item of business is the approval of the consent agenda. And Jake, help me here a minute, was the approval of the research agreement with Norton's on the consent agenda?
No, it was not, because that is
Okay,
a separate approval by the board versus the Research Foundation Board.
Okay, so
But
the only
you
thing
have
we
to
need
include the
to-
additional Finance Committee item.
Yeah, the 255 pages that Raymond referred to had the consent agenda items listed there, but you received late the Finance Committee's recommendation regarding the cost variance of the Research Resource Central Air Handling Replacement Project. So I need a motion and second to add this to the consent agenda. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Now, could I have a motion from a committee member to approve the revised consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify aye.
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 Any opposition? Any abstention? Motion carries. The next item is the approval of the 2021 operating budget, which was just approved by the Finance Committee. Per the board bylaws, section 2.8, approval of the annual operating budget requires a roll call vote. Following a motion and second, I'll call the roll. Please signify aye in the affirmative and nay in the negative. May I have a motion to approve the 2021 operating budget as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I will now call the roll. Benita Black,
Aye.
Scott Brinkman,
Aye.
Randy Bufford. Sorry.
Aye.
Randy Bush. Raymond, did I hear an aye?
I didn't think you called me. You called Raymond Buford. Is it
I
your-
know. I was trying to get both of you at once. No, I corrected myself on Randy, and I am now Raymond first.
I'm aye.
John Chilton,
Yes. Aye.
Sandra Frazier,
Aye. Sorry, I had my
Diane
mic on.
Diane Medley,
Aye.
Mary Nixon, I'm an aye. Jasper Noble,
Aye.
Jim Rogers,
Aye.
John Smith,
Aye.
Krista Wallace Boaz,
Aye.
Ron Wright, Ron, are you on mute? Is Ron-
Mary, I think he dropped off at some point.
Okay, well, then the ayes have it and the motion carries. Our next item has been postponed. That was the approval of the research agreement with Norton Peds. So that is done. Next is the report of the chair. And before I begin, I'd like to ask Neely to briefly update us on the state of the university, just given all the recent events. So Neely, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I will, I'm happy to update you. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is that our pivot to fall plan is online, and we'll give you a much more detailed update in our July meeting, of course. But Beth Boehm and Kevin Gardner and our EVP for research, as you know, as well as numerous individuals all across the university have been working very hard on both a contingency plan for our academic, that's what we're calling contingency plans for our academic year, where we are trying to figure out how can we be nimble so that we have classes in person and online. It's really not, as well as how to come back safely to work. On both, one big thing that I need to tell you is that it's not a question of reopening, because one commitment that we made on our end to all of our students is that we would not just shut our doors in the spring and tell them they needed to go home. As we have told you before, over 40%, about 40% of our students are Pell eligible, and about 20% are barely above. And we realize that for many people, staying at home is not as good an option as staying at the University of Louisville. We are their home. So throughout, we have served about 2,700 students. And I mentioned this to you before, but I'm happy to tell you that with housing, dining, library services, computers, we try to take the very best care of them. So in many ways, what Beth has shepherded through is how do we continue safely into the fall. Those programs, the plan was posted online. We received numerous comments. I believe it was, oh gosh, Beth will have the number handy, but however many individual comments, it was
60.
How many was that?
360 comments, but students actually on their survey had over, I don't know, it was 30% of the students did it. And then in spring, we had over 2,000 or 20,000 comments about the transition to online. So we've had lots of.
Exactly. So just wanted to mention that even though we have the plan online, we're going to be nimble because we don't know what June and July will look like. But right now, I'm pleased to tell you that August 17th, we're so excited about welcoming students on our campus. Another thing that I will tell you is that as we look at our enrollment numbers for the fall, I always caution myself because we actually still look pretty steady, that we'll be about what we were projecting before COVID-19 or a little bit above. Of course, when I talk to my peers across the country and within the Commonwealth, none of us knows for sure, and they all have reports of lower enrollment numbers, so we'll just have to wait and see. It is my hope that students all across are watching and seeing how we truly are trying to be a student's first environment, and that hopefully is shared across and results in having the numbers of students that we hope to see and to serve them. The other issue, Mary, that I would like to bring up is an update on conversations that I've had with the Black Student Union as well as other groups. There are two requests that the BSU brought to us, and it's not just them though, it's the students who may not be part of that, who've also spoken up, SGA in general. The concerns were one about renaming the Honors House, so thank you for doing that. And the second one was whether we would cut ties with the LMPD. And on that, I've explained my position on it, and to all of you as well. Right now, our chief of police, as well as the chair of our Department of Criminal Justice, we're very, very fortunate that they're incredible professionals, leaders across the country who just also happen to be Black. And for criminal justice, Dr. Cherie Dawson-Edwards, as a Black woman, brings a perspective to this issue that not many others could. So extensive conversations with them and with others. Our take right now is that when we look at what we do within our campus, it's all ULPD. But for an urban campus, nestled as we are, with overlapping and concurrent jurisdictions, we rely on LMPD to help us, for example, on our health sciences campus, where you can barely tell where UFL ends and where the city streets begin and vice versa. So our take on it is that we will use the opportunity that we have a criminal justice program, that we have the Southern Police Institute here, where officers come from all over, to really double down on an equity audit of all of the courses we teach, de-escalation training, etc. And our police chief has made commitments to our students on encouraging them to ride along, that we are truly trying to create an environment where our students are safe. So I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have. I will tell you that already on our campus, it's not optional. Every ULPD officer has to have a body cam on, and our chief does random inspections, and this has been going on ever since he took over. And we don't have any formal agreement with LMPD at all. It's just that we, and this is true of every urban campus, that they do have to cooperate and work together. Finally, when off-duty officers, LMPD officers, are hired for athletic events, we've changed the protocol so that it's not hiring by athletics, it's hiring by our chief. So vetting the people who work on our campus. And Chief Lewis made the commitment, and I stand by it, that in our vetting process, we will make sure that any officer that works for us for athletics events, an LMPD off-duty police officer, goes through our training and has to do something extra. It's not just, oh, I'm an LMPD officer, so I get to work on UFL campus, but we'll go through this curriculum where we're actually going to develop it and get some students involved in that process. So that's something else that I wanted to share with all of you. I am really proud of this team. I just look at the year with where we were with the big integration with the Norton Peds deal, and at the same time, keeping everything else moving. So I just want to give a big shout out to all of them. And lastly, Madam Chair, I would like to tell you that we I've always thought of everything in life as now, next, and beyond, that we have to deal with what's happening now. We need to look out at what's happening tomorrow and a little bit beyond. And we haven't taken our eye off of that. So for example, on the grand challenges, I'm glad the themes that arose and that you all approved are the ones that we picked. So when you think about whether it's the epidemic of racial inequity, how do we tackle that? I've been telling the students it's well beyond just the police brutality. That's a very key thing that we need to address. But we've got to look at the fact that Black households have 1/10 the wealth of white counterparts. So these are some deep-rooted issues, and every organization has to address these through their mission. Our mission is through education. We truly believe that education is the path forward, so we are committed to it. We will be bringing you more detail. So we have adopted what we are calling the anti-racism agenda for the year, because it's not going to be, we talk about it now and this goes away. This is a commitment we are making to say through education, how can we create, how can we reduce the opportunity gap? You know, it's not about are some people achieving more than others? It's does everybody have the opportunity to succeed? And that's what we are committed to. So we'll keep you posted as we move forward. I could unveil an anti-racism agenda, but one thing I learned from talking to our students and our faculty and our staff is that it'll be much more successful if we develop it together. So that's something we are kicking off and we hope to bring to you. It's not that we have all the solutions, but I'm looking forward to working with all of our shared governance leaders as well as the wider community. And we look forward to bringing that to you. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. And by the way, the grand challenges, sorry, I started off and I didn't finish. You all know this, but it's something that I'll come back to again and again. Empowering our communities, advancing our health, and engineering the future of work. So whether you think about the pandemic of COVID-19 or the epidemic of racism, all three are relevant. How do we empower our communities? How do we advance health? And how will we engineer the future of work? So that's all I have to say.
Any questions for Neely or any thoughts? Okay, well, thank you, Neely, for that thorough and relevant report. I don't think any of us could have anticipated the year that we were going to have. And I just want to thank you, Neely, your team, and the trustees. I think everybody showed they can be nimble, tenacious, and through a lot of hard work. I feel pretty good about the position we're in, given what's been thrown at us. And that leads me to giving you an update on the presidential evaluation process. Following this meeting, I'm going to schedule a one-on-one with each of you individually to go over Neely's performance evaluation. I'm going to send you her self-assessment following this meeting, and then solicit your input as we continue to work on creating the goals and objectives for next year. You know, once we have those discussions, we'll do the full evaluation on our July 16th annual meeting. I've also asked the governance committee chair to develop a new evaluation tool, which is underway. If you recall this, you know, Benita put together what we're using today. We knew it was a good start, but we knew we had more work to do. So I'll also be soliciting any suggestions you all might have as we put that together for next year. Next item is that Jake has been working hard to finalize the board meeting dates for next year, so he's going to send those to you following this meeting. And then lastly, it is bittersweet to say that this is Jasper Noble's last meeting. Jasper has served the university faithfully, energetically, effectively as the student constituency representative member of the board. He's distinguished himself as being a hardworking, cooperative participant in a wide range of board activities. He certainly has my respect, and I know yours, and the admiration of all the rest of the trustees. Jasper has served on the Finance Committee, the Academic and Student Affairs Committee, He's a representative of the U of L Athletic Association, the U of L Foundation Board of Directors, and he's been just a gem to work with. And he certainly had a very interesting year. Congratulations, Jasper, for living through it. But he has performed above and beyond. He's always a consummate professional. And I think one of the things that I love about him at this, he's just always got a smile on his face. If anybody wants to make any remarks, including you, Neely, I'll open the floor as we have this formal opportunity to thank Jasper and wish him well.
Thank you, Mary, very much. I would like to take a moment and acknowledge all of the contributions that Jasper has made. Some of the things that you might not know, for example, when we were lobbying our legislature for support on our acquisition of the Louisville-based assets of Kentucky One Health, Jasper would reach out to me and say, how can I help? Who can I talk to? And it's not always that you have that confidence, that you have a young person say, yes, here are all the details, go do that. Jasper, I want to tell you that while this meeting was going on, I confess, I got a text from a member of my team that I respect enormously that said, let me find the exact words. It says, I really like Jasper. He's such a sophisticated young leader. And I think that's true because the things that I have really stood out to me about Jasper are his positivity. You know, these are really tough times and it's good to have people that will say, how can I help? Mary, what you mentioned. But he is truly sophisticated in his thinking already in terms of thinking through the implications of different things. And a little shout out to all of our SGA leaders so far that I have had the great pleasure of working with is how cohesive they have been year to year, where they don't lose sight of their priorities. For example, the fact that under Jonathan Fuller, the report that you all began, the audit that's now Jasper stayed on top of and is passing it off to Sabrina, it's been a pleasure. And I just want the trustees to know this. I really do. I've had so many years of being an educator, and I have seen students, not just at the places I've taught, but being guest speakers at different universities and sitting on committees, etc. I would put our students, the best of our students against the best of our students from anywhere else. And I think in Jasper, and shortly you will see Sabrina. We won't talk about her till she's finished her term. We need to make sure she knows she has 1 year to do this. Jasper represents the best of what we have in our student body. Thank you, Jasper, for being collaborative, for being so thoughtful, and for being a sophisticated young leader. I'm looking forward to what you will do next, and I look forward to working with you still in the year to come while you're still in Louisville. And we sent, Madam Chair, we sent Jasper an award that we hoped he could show you a little recognition of his time on the trustees, but it went to his parents' home, not where he is now. So he'll get it, and he's promised to send us a picture of him holding the award. And that credit goes to Jake Beamer for orchestrating that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jake and Jasper. I hope you love it. If anybody else has any other remarks, would love to hear them. And otherwise, I want to give Jasper a chance to say anything if he's got a few words.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Nixon. Thank you, President Bendaputi. Your words are really, I'm tearing up a little bit over here. It has really been one of the greatest honors I've ever had to serve on this board. To all the members of the Board of Trustees, this is not a responsibility or a privilege to have a student on a board like this that I take lightly. It's not something you see across the country and in some places across the state, to have a student voice making the most important decisions that you can. You've taken me seriously every time. You've paid attention to student concerns. You make me really hopeful and really happy about the direction of this university and the leadership that it has and the thoughtfulness with which the highest people at this university make decisions. So thank you all very much. A few special thank yous I have to make. Neely, I came to this university with a different president and then had a different president and then had a different president and then you came along, and the upward climb in overall happiness that I've seen from students and from people on this campus, I think in a lot of ways can be attributed to the work that you've done and the energy that you've put into this campus. I know that I've seen it firsthand. A lot of other people have seen it firsthand. And even those who have just heard about it or have been the recipients of it, I want to let you know that it has not gone unnoticed and that everybody is extremely grateful. Dean Michael Martis, I think he's on this call. If you don't know, Dean Martis is the unsung hero of student government. Anytime we have problems or questions, we text him, we call him at all hours of the day and night. He's always responsive. He's always listening and caring and trying to find a way to help us solve problems or make things better. So we wouldn't be able to do any of this without him. And I know that I and generations of SGA leaders before and after me are and will continue to be extremely grateful to the work that he does. To Michael Wade Smith and to Beth Fame, we bother you guys a lot. We send you a lot of emails about a lot of things that we want to see get done or we're hoping we'll be able to work on together. And you have tirelessly responded, yes, let's meet, let's figure out how to do it. That kind of enthusiasm is not something you see everywhere, and I am extremely grateful for it at every single junction and at every single instance. And Jake, thanks for always keeping me organized, keeping me here, making sure I know where to go. You've been a really good friend, and I'm definitely going to miss being a part of this community. Thank you. There's so many more people that I know I should thank that I probably don't have the time to. Know that if you've worked with student government or the work that you do affects students, we pay attention and we know and we really do care, and we thank you for just committing hours of your lives to making this a better place to be. It's been a really important part of my life these last 4 years, and it will continue to be, and all of that wouldn't be possible without you and without what you do. So thank you. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the next incoming student body president, Sabrina Collins. I got the privilege to work with Sabrina this last year when I was the president and she was the academic vice president. And I've only a few times in my life seen somebody who works that hard and tries that hard to always do the best that they can. I'll let her tell you all a little bit about herself, but I want to let you know in full confidence that I am leaving the university in a better place than I found it because she has been elected, and I'm really excited to see everything that she's going to do. So thank you all very much for everything. This has been one of the greatest experiences of my life, and I'm proud of what we've done and what I've been able to be a part of. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Jasper. I really appreciate it. Like he said, I've worked with Jasper for the last year, and I've really just looked up to him as a leader. And so to hear him say that means a lot. I know that, as it's been said before, this has been a marathon meeting, so I will be brief. But I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and tell you just a few things because we'll get to know each other over the next year. But I'm a rising senior majoring in political science with a track in law and public policy. I'm a Grawemeyer Scholar at the University of Louisville, so I do undergraduate research on the intersection of politics, gender, and religion. I'm really, really excited to be working with you all in the upcoming year. After graduation, I hope to work in the education and policy space. So this is really, what I want to be doing now and for a long, long time. So I'm really excited to be working with you all. I'm really encouraged by the conversations that I've been hearing centered on equity and how we move this campus forward. So yeah, I think that's about it. But I'm really excited to be working with you all, and thanks for having me.
Great. Welcome, Sabrina. We look forward to working with you. I think you're stepping into some big shoes, but it sounds like you can handle it. Jasper, I know you will continue to make us proud. Keep us posted on what you're doing, and you can call on any of us as you continue your journey. So that concludes my report. Is there any other business to come before the board? Having no other business, may I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor signify aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.